So I had talked to Jeff Weiss right during lunch, and he reminded me of a few things that might be helpful in regard to the question about, your question I believe about what's PHMSA going to do in regard to 1173. And he mentioned a few other items that, you know, for the good order, people should be aware of. You know, when we look at ways to improve safety, it's not a single approach. So we have our regulations, you know, we have our prescriptive baseline, we have our integrity management, we fully support safety management systems, but there is a whole lot of other efforts underway. We have R&D programs. We have a big, huge increase in R&D where we're really trying to push, you know, technology that can help improve our ability to detect anomalies, or just the variety of different types of R&D projects. We also have community outreach efforts. We have, you know, something that we call IMP 2.0, and that's where we take a look at the lessons learned over the last 10 years of integrity management, and we say, what can we do better? You know, what have we learned from 10 years? And how can we improve it? And that's our version of IMP 2.0. And that, a lot of those items are actually caught up in proposed rulemaking, which we hope will go out soon. The rulemaking's been prepared for a while. We just start getting across the goal. But so we're not one-dimensional. We try to improve safety every way we can, and sometimes we use a bully pulpit. You know, if we don't have clear authority to do something, but everybody's in agreement it's the right thing to do, we'll go out and we'll suggest people consider it and ask. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that it's more than one piece. But SMS is very important. It is the big picture that can pull everything together. It's the continual improvement piece. And as we're here today, I hope people are thinking about how this can be employed industry-wide, thinking about the challenges, thinking about the opportunities. And I think you're gearing up with questions so that you can ask Robin after he gives his presentation, and then later on our execs. And I would encourage, again, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because that's what we're here for. So with that, I would like to introduce Robin Rorick. Robin is the Group Director of Midstream and Industry Operations at API. In his 20 years at API, he has worked in various capacities in communications, regulatory and scientific affairs, and policy analysis. Additionally, Robin has been involved with each segment of the industry, upstream, midstream, and downstream, working on myriad of issues. He's responsible for all energy infrastructure issues for the Institute, including the gathering, processing, storage, and transportation that might be via marine, pipeline, rail, and trucking of oil and natural gas. So with that, I would like to welcome Robin to do our keynote address this afternoon. Thank you. And by the way, after Robin's presentation, you will have an opportunity for Q's and A's, so be thinking about some questions to stump him.
Easy Q's and A's.
Easy Q's and A's.
Good afternoon. It's quite a pleasure and an honor for me to be here. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. It's also great to meet new folks as well. So I really look forward to coming to these events and doing these sorts of things. And thank you for PHMSA offering to have me come speak to you all as well. So I figured what I would do is run through some quick slides for you, and then I'd really like to save the bulk of whatever time Linda's willing to give me and give you to ask me any questions that you may have for me. One of the things that I want to do is just start out and talk about what our industry has done, or what API has done as of late. We've always worked on various midstream issues, pipeline, marine issues, trucking, rail, terminals. We've worked on them historically, but they've been scattered throughout the organization. API is an organization of committees. We have committees for committees. And we historically had two board level committees, one focusing on the upstream issues, the other focusing on the downstream issues. Because of the feedback from the leadership from our executive committee at API, because of the changes in the oil and gas industry, as well as throughout the country and the globe at large, the executives have directed us to create a midstream committee. And what that in effect has allowed us to do is is combine a lot of these functions that were scattered under one umbrella now. And so if you were to look at, this is just the oil system, we also have one for natural gas. Defining midstream has been somewhat of a challenge for the group because different companies have different midstream definitions, if you will. And so right now where we are is that the upstream exploration and production, downstream is the refining and the marketing, and midstream is pretty much everything that upstream and downstream are not. And that's a pretty broad net. We're trying to refine that a little bit, and that's both for oil and natural gas. And that's really being driven by this fact that if EIA predicts that out to 2040, the U.S. demand for energy is going to increase 12%, and certainly oil and gas are going to play a significant role of that. EIA predicts 60%. Globally, the numbers are even more extreme. The demand predicted by EIA globally is upwards of 50 to 60% more energy use, and oil and gas is going to play about 50% of that equation as well. So with that, and recognizing that we are in a unique situation of the energy renaissance that we're in, there is more focus on the midstream activities than there ever has been, because we're finding oil and we're pulling oil and natural gas from places historically that we have not, and we are more dependent on different forms of midstream infrastructure than we had really considered in the past. So consequently, there is an intense focus on all of the midstream activities. There is the need to look at these issues holistically and ensure that we're addressing them strategically. And certainly, as we look to safety, it has always been a core component of the industry. Throughout the entire process, whether we're talking about in the refining sector or the offshore sector, it is certainly the case in the midstream sector, and the pipeline industry is one of the segments, in my opinion, that leads the way in a lot of the safety activities that you all are here committed to and are doing. So, but we're sort of building off of a tradition, off of a trend, and we're improving on it as the industry is committed to constantly improving safety. And RP 1173 is an important step in that direction and an important step along that journey, focusing on safety management systems. So I commend all of you for your work, not only in creating the RP, but then in carrying it forward and moving the issue forward as a whole. But if we look at commitment, it's really a function of establishing an acceptance of the issue or establishing a culture from the top all the way down. And so this is something that I hear from the member companies over and over and over again, that in order for this to be successful, it really needs acceptance at the topmost level with the leadership, with the CEOs of the companies, and then that gets passed down through whatever the top management, the management, and all the way down to those folks who are in the field implementing it. So it really does become a component of a culture throughout the entire company as well as throughout the entire industry. And from an API perspective, and I know in talking with the other trade associations that I work closely with, that is certainly a culture that everyone believes in and a philosophy that everyone believes in as well. And I had heard in the previous session somebody put it very succinctly, and I'm glad they said it this way, so it just means that we've got the right slide in here. And this is probably the simplest slide, but arguably one of the most profound, in that this is really a journey, that creating RP 1173 and then being done with it is just not really an option. That really this is a long journey that we are on, and one that will require multiple steps, but that the industry is committed to. So this really is something that requires a long-term commitment, and I think that you would see, and that you all here are a testament to that long-term journey. And as we look at safety leadership in the pipeline industry, it's really a component of a couple of things. Certainly stronger regulations, interaction with the public sector from the private, with the private sector, and increased industry attention to safe operations has always been a component of that. Programs such as the API AOPL Pipeline Safety Excellence Initiative are a good example of programs where things like detecting problems before they occur, near misses, being able to analyze threat data, looking at lessons learned, improving leak detection, all of these are components of a more comprehensive system. And 1173 is certainly a piece of that long journey, as I just discussed. And as we've looked at 1173, as I've talked to some of you, and as I've been working very closely with Peter, there are a few key components that have risen to the surface, and I think this is illustrative of how 1173 was developed, but then also illustrative of just the broader safety culture. One is that there is the importance of safety to API and to the industry as a whole. And that gets drilled into our heads over and over again. In my 20 years at API, that has certainly been a recurring theme. Next is this commitment of time and resources, which the industry has fully bought into. And again, this isn't just a time and commitment to develop RP 1173. It's also the time and commitment to maintain it, to implement it, to review it periodically, to revise it as is required. But that is an ongoing initiative. So I think it's important to stress that this isn't something that's a one and done, and we can sort of hang our hats up and say we've done good work and walk away. I think we can certainly commend ourselves for the hard work that's been done up to now, but then it's sort of buckling down and getting ready to move forward with the program. Another clear value is the broad participation, both from oil and gas companies, large companies, small companies. This just ensures that the document that's created is a comprehensive document, that it's not favoring one segment or one component or one size company, that we try to make this as encompassing as it can be. And then, of course, there's the component of ensuring that we are encouraging companies throughout the entire industry, contractors, as was discussed earlier, to really take the RP and implement it and fold it into their systems and into their safety culture. As we look to the RP and the value of the RP, one of the things that I wanted to stress to everyone is that there are a couple of key components also to ensuring that developing the RP and implementing the RP has the maximum benefit to the industry, to the regulators, and to the public at large. A couple of those are, one is ensuring that it is universal, as I just mentioned earlier, ensuring that the document has broad application and it's not targeted to one individual company or one individual segment of the industry or individual segment of even the pipeline industry. Ensuring that there are metrics so that we can assess the performance of the RP, making sure that that changes can be made wherever appropriate, and then also ensuring that there's an educational component as well. And I think that this last one is somewhat critical because oftentimes as we talk within the industry, we forget that there is a world outside of the industry, and ensuring that we can tell the story and demonstrate the commitment of both the industry as well as the regulators to ensure or to communicate the fact that there is this long-term commitment to safety is really key. Whoops. And really this is why, and one of the things that I wanted to leave with you folks is that this path of safety that you all are on, this journey as we've talked about over and over again, is really critical because it allows the system from start to finish, from exploration production all the way down to the end user. It gives us that quote-unquote social license to operate, and that really becomes key. Someone asked a question about whether or not this is good business, and I would say it's absolutely good business, because if we are operating as an industry in an unsafe way, then there's questions about whether or not we should be operating or whether or not we should increase operations or build new pipelines. So I would suggest, and I feel very strongly, that it is not only is it good business, it is critical business to commit to safety improvements that really make a difference. And these need to be calculated assessments, because we want to make sure that we're investing in safety measures that actually improve safety, that don't shift risk, that don't increase risk. And so we're not spending money to spend money's sake. We're not implementing programs just to implement programs, but we're implementing programs that can really demonstrate and can really apply to improving safety. And when we do that as an industry, in the pipeline sector as well as throughout the industry, then these are the results, and this is what we're seeing. These are just some quotes that I pulled up very quickly a few months ago now, that your safe operations in this sector as well as throughout the sector have allowed things like this to happen The first one is a quote from Dow Jones. The second one is a quote from USA Today, and the third one is a quote from Bloomberg, I think. And these are just a couple of snippets, but the whole point is that safe operations allows all of this to happen, and so it's absolutely critical. And it's not just about the operations; it's about the contributions that our industry can make to the nation as a whole. We at API we contracted with IHS to look at the impacts of infrastructure on the nation up to 2025. And these are some of the numbers that they came back with contributions of up to 1.1 million jobs. And a lot of those jobs are in this segment, in this industry, 803,000 jobs, capital expenditures of up to $1.1 trillion. And then you can see GDP contributions and then contributions to the federal and state government revenue. So these are all commitments that I would, again, suggest are available because we can demonstrate that we can operate safely and without incident, and that when there are incidents that do occur or there are issues that need to be addressed, there is also a system to go back, look at those, and shift and adjust where needed to ensure that we can avoid those in the future. And then as we've discussed, this allows you to build more pipelines, to maintain your pipelines throughout the country. And this is, as we look to the future, despite the fact of that crude and gas prices are down, at API we view this as a cyclical industry, and we are in a down point at this time. But at some point we will be coming back up in the industry, and it depends on who you talk to whether or not that happens this year or in a couple of years. There are people who are a lot smarter about this stuff than I am that have a lot better crystal balls than I do. But what we do know is that to maintain this energy renaissance, it's going to take increased investment in infrastructure, whether that's ports and waterways, whether that's rail, and certainly pipelines are going to play an absolutely critical role in that whole equation as well. So thank you to all of you for the work that you are doing. I will thank you now in advance for the work that you will continue to do on safety. Again, I can't stress enough how important it is and how demonstrating as an industry that we are committed to this culture of safety is critical to ensuring that we can continue this path forward. So with that, I'll stop my remarks, and then Linda, I'll turn over to you to have any questions. Yeah, you want to just use this?
But don't go far away. Don't go away. These questions are going to be for you. So, this is a time to ask Robin those tough questions that you might have. And so I would encourage anyone and everyone to go to the mic if you have a question. I actually have a few that I've been thinking of while I've been sitting here. But anybody from the floor or anybody online? Gary, did we have anything? Not yet, we don't know? Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Maybe get the dialogue going a little bit. And some of these questions are going to apply to the liquid industry, but also might include other industries as well, the gas industry. So I understand, if your answer, the other execs may get an opportunity to answer these too. So the real question, as the team worked to put SMS together and put it in play, we had considerable discussion amongst the various members about scalability. The big companies have resources and can absorb this kind of work with difficulty. I mean, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take time. My question to you is, do you have any idea how API or other trade associations can help promote the adoption of 1173 for all companies, not just the big boys, but the smaller companies as well, so we get a more uniform acceptance and application?
So I certainly can't speak for the other trades, but I will tell you that I think one thing that is absolutely essential is that the trades and the industry as a whole speaks with one voice. It certainly doesn't help if different components of the industry, whether it's trades or companies or what have you, are looking at these things and placing a different level of import on them, or saying different saying different things about whether or not, and whether or not this should or should not be implemented. So having a broad commitment by the industry is certainly going to be critical. Finding opportunities to speak about the importance of 1173. One thing that I would challenge all of you here, executives or folks working on the issue, and the trade certainly, is oftentimes when we look at things like recommended practice, we tend to look at them from an industry perspective in very technical terms, and I think companies, rightly so, spend a lot of effort and resources on trying to figure out how they can effectively implement RPs like this one. I think that there needs to be some discussion and thought about developing a communication strategy to ensure that not only are you focusing on the technical components, but also on the softer issues around the RP, making sure that there is a, for lack of a better term, a communication strategy to ensure that we're taking advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves, whether it's at a conference, whether it's at a press release or whatever. But I think that that needs to be a component that needs to be considered a strategic component of the document beyond the technical implementation of it as well.
Guys, I got a list here.
I think I put people to sleep, unfortunately.
That
That's
may
the
have
problem with right after lunch, that's right.
Well, we'll get everybody wound up. So, well, I didn't mean wound up in a bad way. I just meant we'll wake everyone up. So you talked about, both you and a previous speaker talked about metrics and collecting information from the industry. You know, how it'll be, and my question is how would you collect that information and what are you going to do with it? So you collect the information on how the industry is implementing SMS, but what does it tell you? And who are you going to relay that to? Are you going to relay that within the industry? You're going to relay that to regulators? Are you going to communicate that to the public? And then as a part two of that question, you know, we have had integrity management for pipelines in place for a decade, 10 years, more than that, 12 years and some. And it took a long time to mature and to put in place, and we're still learning things, and we're still modifying and improving, and yet we recently saw a report that was released that, you know, took a couple shots at integrity management and said, well, you know, it's not working, we're still having incidents. So my question is, what if 5 years down the road we're still having incidents? Will the public perceive that SMS is not successful? So two-part question. One is about the metrics. What do we do with them and how do we communicate them? And part two is this whole idea of how do we present SMS as a long-term objective?
So I think that there are, well, I can tell you that there are people here who are a lot smarter than I am about talking about how to collect the metrics and how to organize them. I do think that metrics becomes a critical component because it, first of all, it allows you to have a consistent assessment mechanism for improvement, but it also allows you to demonstrate progress. So I don't know if I have an answer to how that's going to be collected or what should be done with it. I think that again, is a discussion that needs to happen both within the companies as well as with the regulators. But we also need to look at it not just from a perspective of what information needs to be given, but also what information do people want to hear, and whether or not the metrics that you're collecting and how they're collected or how they're presented are done in a way that kind of scratches that itch or can get you as close as you can to having those issues addressed or answered. And your second question of SMS is here for the long term. Oh, yeah. You know, one of the things that I've learned working for the industry, part of my responsibility as at API is I also have responsibility for all the crisis management issues at API as well. And it's an incredibly difficult issue simply because it's very much a reactive type thing in the sense that oftentimes you are responding to an incident after it occurred and you're trying to prove to people who have just experienced a release or who have just been subjected to a spill or an incident trying to prove to them that our industry is committed. It's a very, very difficult message to communicate after the fact. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We need to make sure that we're absolutely committed to communicating those points. But I think I believe there needs to be a commitment to communicating those issues and communicating this culture of safety, the work that's done on 1173 prior to the issue. It's hard because, especially in the environment that we are in right now, where companies are looking to be as lean as possible, there tends to be the focus on communicating what we absolutely need to communicate right now. And from a crisis management perspective, one of the things that becomes critical is that you are communicating in the downtime. You're not just communicating in the thick of things. So there needs to be some sort of a commitment from the industry as a whole that when you are doing this work, you are taking time to communicate even when there isn't an issue, to educate, provide some level of knowledge. And even if you're not educating, making sure that those connections are established so that people feel comfortable coming to you when there are questions in the thick of an incident. Hopefully we never do have an incident, but we need to certainly be prepared and be in a position where we are available to answer those questions when they do come.
Anyone else? Okay. I have one more question for you.
I'm happy to give the stage back too.
Yeah, you see what's to.
I'm
Yeah.
interested in the second. I'm interested in the panel after mine, like everybody else is apparently. So.
Well, I have one last question. About 4 years ago, PHMSA went through reauthorization. And slightly prior to that, there were a series of some very tragic and significant, serious, major, put your descriptor in there, but some very significant events that occurred. And so what we saw was a series of very sad events, and then we saw reauthorization. And we saw Congress and various agencies like NTSB and GAO, different people, coming out and saying the industry's not performing as well as it should, the regulator's not performing as well as it should, therefore, here's a laundry list of things that must be put in place. And one of the recommendations coming out of an NTSB investigation was this very standard. So my question to you is, we're coming up on reauthorization again. Very soon, matter of fact, we're starting to have hearings. And many of you have seen the recent media. PHMSA took a little bit of a beating for certain actions. I'm actually proud of what we've accomplished. I think we've made great strides. But my question to you as a representative of API, when you go and you meet with congressional representatives about what has been accomplished over the last 4 years, how will you present SMS as an answer to some of those issues, or as a hope for answer to some of those concerns that they have about our ability, both the regulatory and industry, to perform at a higher level?
So that's a good question. I don't know if I have a lot of good news in this sense, because in the conversations that we are having, well, maybe some of you consider it good news, because in the conversation that we're having up on the Hill, just the political environment that we are in right now, it's going to be hard to get any issues through Congress, whether it's a pipeline reauthorization, whether it's crude oil exports. It's going to be very difficult between the administration, between Congress actually developing a bill, and when Congress develops a bill, whether or not they can develop a bill that the president is willing to sign. It's going to be very difficult from our perspective, and certainly from my perspective, to come up with something that Congress can actually pass and that can get signed. And again, some of you, in instances like pipeline reauthorization, I don't think that that's a good thing. For many other things, I'm sure a lot of people think that that probably is a good thing. But it's, from our industry's perspective, where a lot of the focus right now is going to be with the regulators, and certainly working with the regulators, but that doesn't necessarily preclude our discussions with Congress. In fact, again, I would suggest that despite the fact that things probably will not get done, it's even more of a reason to go up and have these discussions about safety management systems, Again, I believe it's critical that not only is it the trades, but as companies individually are going up to the Hill to have those discussions, as the government is going up to the Hill to educate Congress on what they're doing, it's very critical that people are speaking with the same voice and talking about the importance of 1173, talking about the importance of the culture of safety. Eventually, something will get through. I don't know if it will be before or after the elections, but things will get through. But we need to make sure that we're having those discussions now as opposed to later. I mean, the reality of it is, as I'm sure you're all aware, is that Congress tends to be a very reactive body. And the best that we can do in times when they are not reacting to something is make sure that we can educate, inoculate, if you will, so that you don't get as much knee-jerk reaction in a way that is harmful to the industry or harmful to the regulator, or that is harmful to the issue as a whole. So unfortunately, I don't have a very positive message, but it is a message that will require just as much of a commitment now as it would when we are trying to react to something.
Thank you.
So, no, thank you. Thank all of you as well for your hard work.
Thank you. Oh, it looks like we've got a question from...
I didn't jump off fast enough, did I?
Almost. Tony Cockshut from Enbridge. RP 754 is process safety metrics. And is there any consideration in API to doing something similar for the pipeline industry? We've talked quite a bit about metrics this morning, and it would help with solidifying the SMS.
So I know that there's been a discussion about expanding it, but I can't. Every year we put out, through our standards department, David Miller, who's our standards director, puts out a list of the standards that we're planning to work on for the next year. And I'll be honest, I don't know if that's on the list, but I know it's been in the discussions. But I'll be happy, Tony, to go back and check.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
So, I appreciate you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Robin. I'm surprised you guys didn't come up with some really hard questions for him. But I know you will do so for the executives that we're going to have up next. So with that, we're due for a break. We're running just about 10 minutes early. So what I would suggest is if you all are game, how about we start again at 2:30? That'll give you a 20-minute break. Is everyone good with that? Yep, okay. We'll be back here at 2:30.